G'day and welcome to Motley Fool, What I've Been Reading, the imaginatively titled series where we talk about things that, we've been reading. When I say we, I get to sit down with the Motley Fool analyst team, at least one member of that team, every single week and have a conversation about what's on their proverbial nightstand, which is both wonderful but also kind of partly horrifying because sometimes I've read the book, most times I've heard of the book, and occasionally I get one that I haven't read or heard of, and I have to add that to my list. And I think that might be the case with today's book. But to introduce it, first let me introduce Benny O. Benny, g'day.
G'day, Scott. Thanks for having me on.
Mate, thanks for joining us. Now, you're going to tell us about the Almanack of Naval Ravikant. Now, I had to get the pronunciation from you, by Eric Jorgensen. I said to you, I've never heard of it. And you're like, man, this is popular everywhere. So I've been hiding under a rock. But let's assume that at least one person watching is under the same rock as I've been under. Tell us what the Almanack of Naval Ravikant, which is, by the way, a strange sounding name, but I'm sure a wonderful book. What is it actually about?
Yeah, it's, like I said before offline, it's a really popular book out there. And it's a book that was actually put together by Eric Jorgensen, and he collected all the wisdom, all the principles, all the experiences that Naval had experienced in the last decade or so. And it's all around building wealth and creating long-term happiness. And he's created this from like all of the podcasts he's been in, all the interviews he's been in, but also on his massive, Naval's massive on Twitter and X. So a lot of the tweets and what he calls tweet storms that he just has rambles and then thoughts about. So he's collected all this, but you might be asking, who is Naval Ravikant?
Benny, who is Naval Ravikant?
Naval, at a very high level, he's an entrepreneur. I think he's co-founded a few tech companies, and he's currently the chairman of AngelList, which he co-founded as well. That's a platform where he connects, I think, founders with investors. But I mentioned AngelList, but he's also an angel investor. And he's actually invested, I think, over 100 companies out there. And some of them have been major tech companies like Twitter, like Uber. There's a company named Notion. That's a note-taking company there. But he's obviously been really successful in that realm. But at a very high level, the book has two big themes. I already touched on it: building wealth and building happiness. In the first half, he talks about how wealth isn't about money or status. It's about freedom. And true wealth is owning assets that work for you while you sleep. And in the second half, he talks about happiness. And in happiness, he says it's a skill you can learn. It's about being at peace with what you have and not chasing desires constantly. But what stood out to me was how relevant these ideas were, not just for investors, but for anyone who wants to achieve financial freedom, but also think more clearly and also make better life decisions.
That's a pretty good summary, mate, and a great kind of set of goals to achieve. I guess I'm curious, have you got any particular insights, anything jumped out at you want to kind of share with our viewers? It's a bit of a taster, so they can go and grab the book themselves.
Yeah, when I was reading this book, obviously as an investor, I'm always trying to think of it in an investing lens as well.
Yep.
But some of the key lessons that I got, and one of the core lessons that Naval is trying to articulate, is that building wealth and creating long-term happiness are skills that we can learn. And so it's not about luck. It's not about perfect timing. It's about developing good judgment, but also training the right mindset as well. And I think the core skill that he's talking about here is obviously learning judgment, learn to build judgment. And to build judgment, you need to read a lot, which is what this whole video is about. We're just investors that love to read, but also learning mental models and focusing on first principles. But not only that, having the time to reflect for clear thinking. And I think a lot of the great investors out there, like Warren Buffett per se, they just sit around and read a lot and a lot and a lot, but they use a lot of that time not just reading, but thinking, which is really critical. I think this ties into the principle that wealth is freedom. For an investor, when we're thinking and when we're investing, we want to build wealth, right? And to build wealth, that means owning equity, a piece of a business. And as an investor, we tend to own a piece of a company through stocks or ETFs. And in terms of happiness, Naval says that happiness is also a skill that you can learn. And it's more training your mindset by focusing on what you can control, controlling your habits, controlling your thinking, but also temperament. And I think that's a big one there, because in this dynamic world right now, there's always something to worry about, right? So there's interest rates, there's politics, there's inflation. But I think the key here is that if you can accept that volatility is just part of the game, that kind of acceptance is what allows us to stop making decisions in panic. So that's the investing parallel. And I think a lot of the great investors out there, they tend to stay calm when everyone else is emotional, right? So learning to control that kind of internal panic is probably one of the most underrated investing skills out there. So that's the first lesson. But the second lesson that I got out of the book was what Naval defines as specific knowledge. He says it's really important to build specific knowledge, and he defines as expertise that you cannot be trained for. And it's typically a unique combination of your passions, your curiosity, but also your professional background. And to build specific knowledge, what you'll find and what this kind of test should be is that it will feel like play to you, but it'll look like hard work to others. And so I think, especially with a lot of fads and hype out there in the world at the moment, it's probably not it's very important not to focus on what's hot, but also focusing on what you're uniquely good at and what you're uniquely interested in. And drawing back to the investing lesson, I probably think this aligns and relates to us as investors investing only in our circle of competence. And so instead of trying to be an expert in everything, you find your niche, you find your edge, and you look at your own life for clues in terms of your existing experiences, your existing hobbies, and leveraging that to develop a deeper understanding of specific industries, specific technology, or even business models. And for example, myself, I'm naturally curious about new technology. I'm naturally curious about strong brands. So that means I love digging into software companies. I love digging into consumer brand companies. And I think that gives me specific knowledge and conviction in those areas. I'm also quite extroverted, so I enjoy meeting new people. I enjoy having genuine conversations with them about what they do, about their industries, about their businesses. And I think that kind of scuttlebutt investing approach kind of opens up insights that you don't really find on like investor presentations or annual reports. So I think that specific knowledge and that curiosity is what helps you build conviction in investing. So having that conviction, you're able to hold a position when the market disagrees with you, right? But the last lesson I'll probably want to share with you is, which I think is really important, is Naval says to play long-term games with long-term people. And he argues that nearly all returns in life, whether that's wealth, relationships, or health, that's the result of compound interest. And compounding only happens when you're involved in games that last long enough, right? Durability. And for us as investors and investing, when you buy shares, you're not just buying a ticker code. You're essentially entering into a long-term partnership in a business. So the management team, the company's culture, these are the long-term people that you're actually investing in. And for me, I like to invest in companies that are typically owner-operated or founder-led companies, because the management typically have skin in the game, right? And these are the long-term people that have their personal wealth tied directly to the company's success, not just in the next quarter, but over many, many years. So that's in terms of long-term people. But I think the business itself has to engage in long-term games. And what that means is you kind of have to have a sustainable competitive advantage. Business models that take a long time or even great effort for other competitors to replicate, I think that gives durability for businesses, right? So those are some of the key investing lessons. There's so many more timeless principles that I could share, but just a few that I think is quite insightful and quite relatable for us as investors.
That sounds like a very good summary, Benny. Thank you very much for sharing all of that with us. Really appreciate your insight. And it sounds like a great book. I've already downloaded it, so I'm going to listen to it sometime this week. Try and get through it anyway. In the meantime, mate, thanks for being with us. Thanks to you for watching us. Make sure you do all the usual YouTube things. Notify, like, subscribe, all the good YouTube stuff so you don't miss anything from The Motley Fool. Until next time, Fool on.